How much fat do we need on a zero carb diet, a carnivore diet, a keto diet, a paleo diet? How much fat should we be eating? And this video is going to answer that question, as well as kind of questions about what you should be eating on any diet, really, using the logic that I'm about to use. And to answer this as short as possible, it's go with your natural appetite. But you have to keep two things in mind. You have to keep in mind food palatability, what food you're eating, and does that alter your natural appetite due to preparations. And the second one is the nutrient density of the food, as very high nutrient foods like wild-caught fish, salmon roe, brain tissue have much lower palatability than other foods do. So the first thing we need to talk about is food palatability in general, and I'm going to do a separate video on that. But it's basically, if you're eating bacon, like bacon's a hyper-palatable food, it's cured with salt and sugar, it's smoked. I mean, ice cream is not zero carb or carnivore, but it's an example of a hyper-palatable food. And a hyper-palatable food has sugar or sweetness and some type of preparation added to the food. It also is like an artificial flavor. So if you're on keto eating heavy cream and bacon, you know, that's drastically different from someone on a raw carnivore diet eating fat and raw fat and meat. That's going to have two drastically different appetites and different hunger levels and satiation depending on the food. And what I'm getting at is, if one food you're eating, if the fat you're eating has a drastically higher food palatability than the lean, or vice versa, you might throw things out of whack. If you're eating bacon with raw muscle meat, you know, your fat might be too high because all you want to eat is bacon. If you're eating raw beef fat with perfectly crispy seared muscle meat tossed with balsamic glaze, then you might eat too much protein. There's two problems that can happen. Usually it's the former, sometimes it's the latter. Almost always it's the former. Almost always people are eating too much fat and too many calories because of the palatability. So if you can reduce food palatability to a base, and if you guys want to know more about food palatability, we'll do that in another video because it's too long, but that's the basic first problem with determining how much fat you need to eat and going your natural appetite. Because if you're using those examples and any problems occur related to that, it's hard to eat according to your natural appetite. So the second one is the nutrient density of the food, and it's very, very interesting that if you eat a lot of liver or brain tissue and then you go on to eat your meal, or even if you eat some wild-caught fish first before your meal, which is usually a few hundred calories, very low in calories compared to what a lot of people on zero-carb, carnivore, or keto eat, by eating those high-vitamin foods, especially organ meats, you reduce your appetite drastically enough that you'll only eat, I doubt you'll go above 1,000 calories for your meat and muscle meat. Your muscle meat and fat. I think anyone who's interested in balancing proper fat and protein and just food ratios in general should try to eat nutrient dense foods and other things first in their meal in order to do that. So the nutrient density is one other thing to keep in mind with the foods you're eating. That can drastically change the satiation. And the last thing is going to be your basic hunger mechanism. So if you fix those first two things, if you know you're not eating, you know, foods that are drastically different palatability levels from each other. I mean, yeah, you could eat bacon with heavy cream and balsamic glazed muscle meat, but if you're eating them in proper ratios, that's fine, but you just don't want to throw anything out of whack. If you have those first things relatively even, or at least keep that in mind, then you can go with your natural hunger. So you could say, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to eat some beef fat, some meat, and some organ meats, and I'm going to eat the organ meats and the beef fat first to get those hunger signals out of the way, and then I'm going to eat the muscle meat. And the way that works is the beef fat, your body tells you to stop eating it based on the amount of bile you have in your gallbladder that your liver can produce, and partly on your stomach capacity as well. I used to make this beef fat cream that I have to make again. I got to get a better food processor. You guys want to buy me one? The only reason I don't do it is because it's a lot of work, but I'll talk about that in another video. Anyway, I had this pure fat mixture, and I would pretty much eat spoonfuls of it. And I would eat 5 or 6 spoonfuls of this pure fat mixture, and I would be hit with this feeling of, okay, stop eating. But I could go and eat some lean meat afterwards. So my fat signals were craved on a matter of 600 to 700 calories of pure fat. Sometimes more, sometimes less. So then, moving on to a muscle meat, or not a muscle meat, but an organ meat item would be any sort of like mineral imbalances, mineral deficiencies, and your body generally craves a few bites of muscle meat per day, whether it's liver or brain tissue or marrow. you eat a few bites of it and you're good. So generally 100 to 300 calories of organ meats to me is what my natural appetite dictates. And then finally, muscle meat can really vary. Sometimes I eat those foods and then I don't want any muscle meat. Sometimes I eat a pound of muscle meat, but that's pretty much how it goes. And a final thing to keep in mind is the quality of the food you're eating will also dictate your appetite and how much of it you want to eat. If the grass-fed beef fat you have, maybe the guy lied to you and sold you grain-fed beef fat and it tastes gross and acrid, then you don't want to eat it. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. Buying high-quality food makes it taste good, and that's why we can use our natural appetites to determine how much we want to eat. So I think I've answered any question that you could possibly have related to how much fat you should eat and how to determine why. I mean, things like salting your food, seasoning your food, I'll talk about that in my food palatability video. And this logic can be applied to any diet in regards to the palatability arguments, the nutrient density arguments, as well as the, applying that overall to your natural appetite.